Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's CJ. Welcome back to episode 17 of the 120 gallon reef build. Now I know it's been a long time since my last update, and honestly, something called life has gotten in the way. As I mentioned before, I'm a head football coach, with work and just trying to prepare for the season. I just have not had much time for the hobby, haven't had much time for my tank, and unfortunately not much time to make videos. But with that being said, I still have some older footage on my phone, starting with a few LFS tours. I want to make sure I catch you guys up on everything that I have, and then we'll finally get to what happened recently regarding fish deaths and hopefully, moving forward in the right direction with this tank. So let's get to it. Now, for those that are new to my channel, the LFS we're in right now is called Aquatica. Roughly 10 minutes away from my house and by far my favorite place to shop. Not only because it's just right up the street, but honestly, it keeps a great selection of healthy fish, healthy corals, and because I shop here so often, he always takes care of me, giving me fair pricing, and will even order me, specific fish if I asked for it. So, you always want to support your local LFSs. It's cool to shop online, but honestly, what are you going to do when your computer breaks and you need something right away? You're going to drive up the street, so make sure you support those guys. Now, with that being said, I had a stock list plan, at least, 16, 17 fish in my 120 gallon tank. And I think I had it mapped out for the most part, but we are all guilty of impulse buys. So one thing I will say, if you are going to try to purchase a fish that wasn't on your original plan, at the very least, have the LFS try to feed the fish for you. Now, fortunately, in my situation, there were 2 butterfly fish in here. I've never had one. I wanted to try it. The bigger one didn't go after the food, but the smaller one did. So I was like, hey, this may be a good thing. So I went ahead and picked up that guy, and we're going to keep adding to the stock list. So after a quick trip across town, we've arrived at the second LFS today. This one's going to be called Sandy's Pet Shop. Now this is roughly 20-25 minutes away from my house, and to be honest guys, I don't really visit this one very often. I would say it's been roughly a year and a half or so. I used to always come here and purchase African cichlids back in my freshwater days, but I never really paid attention to the saltwater selection. I really didn't understand it. So visiting today, I got a new perspective on the hobby, and I was interested in seeing, what's changed, what was new in the store. I gotta admit, pleasantly surprised. Looks like they've definitely stepped up the game as far as their fish selection, cleaned up their, saltwater coral selection. The tanks look a lot cleaner. And I gotta admit, I may have to add this to the stores that I frequent, a little more often, especially when it comes to buying corals for my reef tank. Now, for anyone that's new in the hobby watching this, I do want to give you one small word of advice if I could. Make sure you are very careful with where you buy your fish and corals. Keep in mind, not every LFS is created equally, not everyone has the same water parameters, not everyone makes sure their tanks are pest free. So you gotta make sure you do your research, do your homework, and understand what, red bugs look like, what flatworms look like, what aptasia is, or whatever other the common pest could come in on these corals, because the last thing you want is to stock your tank from this place and that place and all these different places and potentially, infect your tank with something that you just can't get rid of. Now, me, personally, I've always tried to shop at one place, Aquatica. This trip across town was something that I normally never do for that, exact reason. And I'm mentioning this now because honestly, I think this may have something to do with what happened in my tank, but we'll talk about that later. Just keep that in mind, be careful with where you shop. And ultimately, guys, if you find a good place that gives you good corals and good fish, just stick with that place and don't worry about going anywhere else. So at this point, all the driving and shopping at LFSs is completely done. I picked up all the fish I wanted from my stock list and even added a few additional fish that I've never seen before, and I figured, hey, why not add them to the system? So at this point, it's all about acclimating, drip and temperature acclimating before I add these guys to my tank. And for those that are wondering, I've yet to quarantine any fish in this system. Honestly, I've never quarantined a fish. So for anyone new in the hobby, if you're looking at me thinking, hey, I'm going to do what he did, I'm going to tell you, do not follow my steps. This is a situation to where I say you do what you do, I do what I do, and then we all will, suffer the consequences of our own decisions. So with that being said, all went well as far as adding fish to the tank, and we'll talk a little bit more about what happened after the fact a little later. So let's go ahead and get to it. Now, when it comes to adding fish to my system, it's just like anyone else's system. The fish that have been established have set up their own hierarchy. Who's the boss, who's on the bottom of the food chain. And unfortunately, the powder blue decided to immediately attack the copper band butterfly fish. So even though this guy was eating in the LFS, in my tank, it was a whole different story. It just wasn't working out. So I ended up having to return him. Now, when it comes to a few other fish that were a little more skittish than I thought, one was the peppermint hogfish. Gorgeous fish, I specifically ordered to have in my tank. And the second was my flame hawkfish. So these guys hid out for a few days, but eventually they end up coming out and eating and swimming around freely and join the rest of the crew in the tank. Now, for anyone that's new in the hobby or new to my channel, I did start this tank off with dry, uncured Pucani rock. I didn't acid bathe it. I didn't, do anything to purify this rock. I literally just rinsed it off, threw it in the tank, let it cycle, and just rolled with it. So what happens, 1, 2, 3 months later with this Pucani rock? Well, honestly, guys, weekly haircuts. And I say weekly haircuts because I literally get my hands in the tank, take a toothbrush or some kind of scrubbing brush, and dust off this algae that continues to grow back. This is basically, what you can expect. This Pucani has tons of nutrients trapped inside of it, organics breaking down, and until all of that eventually burns itself out, this is what you're going to deal with. So, it depends on if you want to put your hands in the tank and get rid of it, or try to dose your tank with chemicals. No matter what, all roads lead to this eventually happening. When it comes to this hobby, I'm a firm believer that your system is only going to look as good as the time and effort you put into it. If you're a lazy hobbyist, you're going to have a lazy looking tank. So in my situation, I tried my best to keep up on my husbandry. Cleaning my rock work as I felt the need, keeping my glass clean, scrubbing the back wall of the tank, keeping my filtration clean as far as my filter floss, my skimmer cup, my algae scrubber, and just maintaining the tank. Even though it doesn't have any corals, I still want it to be the best looking fish only with live rock tank that I could create, at least at this point. And this footage is proof of that. I really enjoy looking at the tank this way. Now keep in mind, this is footage from a few weeks ago, when I had the time and I had the energy to put it into the tank. We're gonna skip forward to what it looks like now in a moment, but I still wanna make sure I reflect on this because it definitely is gonna hold true for anyone new in the hobby. The time you put into it is gonna yield the results you want. Now, when it comes to the system itself, honestly, haven't been many changes. I've just been kind of letting it roll and letting it do what it's gonna do. I did make a small improvement to the biological filtration. Ended up adding another 4 liters of Seachem's pond matrix. Now, for those that are new to my channel, I've been using this stuff for years. I absolutely love it. And honestly, this is only my second time having to purchase it because it lasts so long. Use the same media across 4 different tanks, from freshwater to 3 different saltwater tanks, and it still gets the job done. So that kind of longevity and that kind of, return on your investment is unheard of, especially when it comes to biological filtration. So I highly recommend it. Now, one of the main reasons I wanted to add it was to add that additional surface area as far as my bacteria, and also to become a breeding ground in my refugium for copepods. I figured what better place than, 2-3 inches deep worth of pumice rock and letting them just kind of, keep repopulating the tank and keep being a great food source for any of the wrasses or pot eaters I end up adding later down the road. Now, we'll tell you guys, this stuff will float on you, so don't be alarmed. It's just that porous and that light. Eventually, it will soak up that water and sink down to where you want it to be. And when it comes to the equipment on the tank, honestly, everything's still the same. Still have the skimmer, the calcium reactor, the algae scrubber. I did make a small improvement to the auto top off. It's now being controlled by my Apex, a float switch, and my breakout box. But we'll cover that in another video. But everything's still performing well. Skimmer still skimming, foaming. The only thing that has really slowed down has to be the algae scrubber. For those that are curious, this thing used to be harvested every week of, a fist size of algae. But ever since the tank has started growing algae on the Pucani, it's been kind of outcompeting the algae scrubber. So for now, I'm just gonna keep rolling with it, and we'll talk more about that later when the time comes. So what does the tank look like today? Here it is, guys. I literally just walked in from practice, finally cleaned the glass with a mag float, pulled out the camera, and recorded this footage for you guys. It's time to give you guys the real deal. This is what happens when you go from servicing a tank weekly to getting too busy with life and walking past your tank, dropping food in, and literally walking out the door. It's what I've done for the last 3, almost 4 weeks at this point. No water changes, no anything. And this is the result. So what happens when you neglect your tank? Well, everything that you were cleaning gets a foothold, including the algae. As you guys can tell, algae is seriously starting to take over the Bikini Rock. Now, some places is worse than others. In some places, with lower flow or a buildup of nutrients are actually starting to grow cyanobacteria, that purple looking stuff. So, is this a situation I'm really overly concerned about at this point? Honestly not. Algae is the natural source of food. It also is a natural source of nutrient export. So whatever it's growing from, it's removing from the water. And eventually, when the time comes, when I actually get in here and brush this off and do a water change, I'm going to be able to get this tank back into shape pretty quickly. But that's not the thing I really want to share with you guys. Algae is something that's part of the hobby. Something worse has happened over the last few weeks, and let's talk about it. Now, when I first started adding fish to the tank, a lot of people were wondering, hey, he's not quarantining, is this going to work out? How are you getting these fish to live? How are they all healthy? How's this all working out for you, and it never works out for anyone else? Well, honestly, guys, there was no magic answer for that. I did my best to pick healthy fish from one store, and overall, it worked pretty well for me. Up until about a month ago, my luck literally ran out. And it also ran out around the same time I visited a different LFS. Now, this is not a situation where I'm saying, hey, that caused it, or maybe it was a different fish, because you can never truly identify what fish caused your issue without quarantining each fish one by one. But I'm putting things together as far as a timeline, and I'll let you guys be the judge. So roughly around that time, I added those fish from another LFS. My yellow tang started showing signs of stress, loss of appetite, rapid breathing, just bad signs as far as a fish being healthy. Unfortunately, after a freshwater dip, that guy ended up not making it. Now, as far as a reefer, you hate losing any fish. You hate losing any life in your tank, corals. Any loss is a failure as far as a hobbyist to a certain degree. Now, with that being said, the losses didn't stop there. Not only did I not save the yellow tang, I also could not save the other fish after him. Now, over the period of the next 3 weeks, I slowly kept losing fish. Seemed like the same symptoms. Some I can spot, some I couldn't, and even some fish I could clearly see the white spots on them. So I'm almost positive it was ick that ended up taking out these fish. So what fish did I actually lose? Well, going down the list as far as what I can remember, no particular order. We're going to start off with the yellow tang. I also ended up losing my Tamini tang. I ended up losing my flame hawkfish, my peppermint hogfish, my diamond spot goby, my starry blenny, my lawnmower blenny, and I believe that is the fish that I lost. If I left something off the list, I'll drop it down below in the comments just to kind of get the complete loss of life list for you guys that are curious. But overall, each fish was really a reminder that we really cannot control anything in this hobby. As much as, we try to quarantine, as much as we try to play the luck game or try to pick the healthiest fish, sometimes it's just not in the cards, and you just got to learn how to accept the losses and keep it moving. What's going to be your next step? How are you going to come back from it? So at this point, the plan's simple. Take a few steps back. I'm no longer going to invest in livestock until I make sure that whatever was killing the fish has run its course. And for the most part, from what I can see over the last week or two, everybody looks fine. But that still doesn't mean I'm going to rush into replacing what was lost and repeat the process again. So it's going to take some time. Now, luckily in my situation, with me being busier, coaching and doing family related things, it makes it a little easier to take your time when your focus is not necessarily on the tank as much as it used to be. So I'm going to take advantage of this time, whether it takes a few weeks for me to kind of get back on my feet or a couple of months. I'm more than happy to keep letting this tank mature, that algae, let it grow, do water changes, keep investing in my equipment, whether it be buying an additional gyro like I just purchased or additional Apex equipment, or whatever the case may be, but to continue to set myself up for the long-term success that I'm looking for. And long-term won't happen by, getting that instant gratification, that instant stock list, that instant, corals in the system. I'm not in a hurry for that. I'm looking for this tank to be mature and look its best at the 2-year mark. So I feel like I'm still on track for that. And eventually, hopefully you guys will be able to see that too. Now, for those of you all that were curious, I still do have roughly 10 fish in the system. Starting off with the powder blue tang, which is very surprising considering how sensitive those fish are. I also have my potter's angel, my flame angel, my green and yellow chorus wrasse. I have my clown fairy wrasse, my tricolor fairy wrasse, my melanaris wrasse, and I also have my paddlefin and my blue head wrasse. So all the wrasses appear to be very hardy and surviving whatever was going on. And of course, the angelfish and the tang is doing well. So what's next? Honestly, can't really say as far as my stock list. Now, as far as corals, I know a lot of you are wondering, hey, where are the corals at, CJ? Trust me, guys, it's going to take some time. Once I actually know I'm going to have the time to dedicate to the tank, testing my water parameters, I'm going to get back into it and whip it back into shape. So I just felt the need to get an update out there for you all, let you know, hey, tank's still rolling. Just life got a little busy, but a CJ is going to be back stronger than ever as soon as I get some time. So other than that, it's time to stop this video. So as always, hey, hope you guys enjoyed it, and like, comment, subscribe. You guys keep doing what y'all do. Y'all be easy. Happy reefing.